takes pleasure in attracting a stellar list of speakers that address today's most relevant issues. The club's place as a refuge for rich discussion and networking has never wavered after 123 seasons.
We are dedicated to encouraging debate on the issues that matter to this city, this province, and this country.
The Canadian Club is one of the most important podiums anywhere in the world that a Canadian can speak to, tell Canadians what it is that they think, develop those thoughts. And so I want to thank you for that very, very much.
Please join me in thanking our esteemed panelists today.
Through our programs and events, including our youth and young leaders programs, our diversity partnerships, our joint events, and our media and social media opportunities, we offer you access to dynamic political, social, and business figures from abroad and right here at home.
The platform from which the eloquence of Canada has flowed all of that time, whether it be business, education, politics, sports, arts and culture. If someone wants to say something to Canadians about this country and about the future of this country, this is the venue you choose.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bruce Sellery. Welcome to the Canadian Club of Toronto. I am a past president of the Canadian Club, and we're grateful that you have joined us today. There has been an incredible amount of activity over the course of the last 6 months. Some of it prominent and fresh to the eye, some of it behind the scenes. But of course, now we're moving into a period in which the economy is opening up. Schools are opening up. Offices are opening up. And today we're going to focus our conversation on this road to recovery. Our guest is the Honourable Victor Fedeli. He is here to talk about the importance of supporting and promoting Ontario's world-class manufacturing sector and also some other initiatives that the government is undertaking to grow the province's economy. Before we dive into today's topic, I have a couple of logistical notes for you. First of all, if you're finding that your internet feed is a little slow, you can click here to switch streams. So look on your screen, you'll see it's a little button that will help you if your internet is a little slow. Your audio quality will be unaffected, but your video might look a little slower. Also, we would love your questions. It is very simple to do that. There is a questions tab. Click on the questions tab and you can enter them in the window. They will be sent to our moderator. The request help button is available to you if you are having technical difficulties, and we'll endeavor to help you sort all these things out. Now, the Canadian Club of Toronto has been around for 124 years, and really we exist because of two things. One, viewers like you showing up to talk about what matters most to Canadians, but also our sponsors, right? This wouldn't be possible as a nonprofit. It would not be possible if we did not have the support of sponsors. And today we would like to thank the contributions from both Bruce Power and from PwC for making today's event possible. Now, to introduce our speaker. The Honourable Victor Fedeli is Ontario's Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. He is a lifetime entrepreneur, a lifelong entrepreneur, successful business person, author, and philanthropist. He was also the mayor of North Bay from 2003 to 2010. And in 2011, Minister Fedeli was elected to the Ontario legislature and is now serving his third term as MPP for Nipissing. After some brief remarks, Minister Fedeli will be joined in conversation by Adrienne Batra. She is the editor-in-chief for the Toronto Sun and a director of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Now, many of our traditions have evolved in this new virtual world, but one of them that we are keeping consistent is our toast to Canada. So to Minister Fedeli and to Adrienne, if you could raise your glass out there, whatever you happen to have in your glass, we'll say it's coffee or water, something a little sparklier. If you could raise your glass and give a toast to Canada. To Canada.
To Canada.
All right. We are ready to begin our proceedings. And Minister Fedeli, I will pass the podium of the Canadian Club of Toronto over to you.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be here on behalf of Premier Ford and our entire team. I want to say thank you to Bruce. The prep for this, the last 15 minutes was probably the most entertaining 15 minutes that I've seen in the last 6 months. So thank you for that. Thank you to the Canadian Club. Thank you to PwC and to Bruce Power and Adrian. I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thanks for everybody at the Canadian Club for putting us all together. It's really important that you brought us all together, probably more now than ever before. And looking at this huge list of everyone who have joined us today, it's easy to imagine how your professional and personal lives look a lot different today than they did 6 months ago. Yet everyone still finds time to organize and participate in forums like this to share lessons learned, keep our province and our country moving forward. So again, to Bruce and Adrian and everyone joining us today, thank you for everything you're doing to keep us strong. It really is the Ontario spirit in action, and that's part of what I'll be talking about today. Ontario's response to these unprecedented times has, no doubt like yours, certainly changed and evolved how we do everyday business. At the outset of the crisis, none of us had a playbook to deal with anything like this. There simply was no manual. But we knew that by banding together and putting politics aside, which I think everyone here will agree has happened, there's nothing that Ontario families and businesses wouldn't be able to accomplish. Ontario has world-class academic and research institutions, the most talented workers anywhere in the world. And Ontario is the workshop of Canada, has a world-class manufacturing sector that can produce anything from life-saving pharmaceuticals to the next generation of vehicles, and quite frankly, everything in between. And we have a leading innovation and technology ecosystem that can make the solutions of tomorrow a reality today. That is what Made in Ontario solutions are all about. And it's a key pillar in our government's approach to combating COVID-19 while ensuring our road to recovery is sustainable and contributes to a long-term economic recovery. And this leads me to talk to you a little bit about our Ontario Together portal and our Ontario Together Fund. That started initially, and perhaps most importantly, with securing much needed personal protective equipment, PPE, and other critical items for the health and safety of our frontline workers. In March, we, like you, we were faced with a situation where critical supplies and equipment was suddenly in short supply. Ventilators, masks, hand sanitizers, wipes, suddenly they were hard to access and really hard to find on the shelf of a store. And hospitals, care providers, and other organizations that were looking to continue operating, many represented by some of you here today, you all needed to secure a steady supply of these products. But traditional supply lines were suddenly vulnerable. Demand was greatly outstripping supply as the pandemic started to bite hard all around the world. Businesses, some of them part of critical supply chains, shuttered. And hoarding wasn't just something your neighbors did with toilet paper. Now, I know none of you did that, of course, but it became a national threat. Well, who came through for us? No surprise, it was Ontario's businesses. Businesses from across our province came through with supplies, innovations, and ideas to help protect our frontline workers and vulnerable individuals and all the businesses in Ontario. Now, one of the earliest companies to step forward was Virox Technologies in Oakville. Virox was our first manufacturer to receive money from the Ontario Together Fund for their work in creating the next generation of disinfectants in the war against microbes. An investment from the Ontario Together Fund in Virox allowed them to double their production disinfectant wipes to about 6,000 cases a day while creating vital new manufacturing jobs. It's a great facility to tour in Oakville. Investments like Virox have assisted in keeping our people, our frontline workers, and our communities safe while helping to slow the spread of COVID-19. Now, Virox was one of the first companies to come forward with an idea, but certainly they were not the last. We received more than 29,000 submissions. All of these are ideas that were to set up the Ontario Together portal to handle them. 29,000 submissions. Now, there's some great individual stories that I'll tell you along the way, but let's just look at the big numbers first to give you an idea of the response that we've received. 29,000 submissions, more than 19,000 emergency supply leads came from that, and we converted that into $836 million in purchases of critical supplies and equipment to support our frontline staff. That translated into 29,000 gowns, more than 439 million gloves, 148 million masks, and over 14 million face shields. So for those submissions that needed some assistance getting off the ground, we introduced the $50 million Ontario Together Fund. And through the fund, we've been providing immediate support to businesses and organizations to build their capacity, and most of them pivoted to manufacture the supplies and equipment needed in our hospitals, our long-term care homes, and other critical public services. So here's another story about two unlikely partners who came together with a great idea. In 2015, Moyer's Apple Products and Cleanworks in Beamsville co-developed innovative technology to disinfect apples for caramel apples to combat the listeria outbreak. And as the COVID pandemic struck, those two innovators realized their technology could be harnessed to help ensure the health and safety of Ontario families and workers. So the Clean Flow Mini was born, and this innovative new portable device is used to sanitize N95 masks and other PPE for frontline workers at a rate of 800 masks per hour. Their technology is Health Canada approved and can destroy up to 99.99% of pathogens and viruses on surfaces. So with help from the Ontario Together Fund, they've tripled their production capacity to meet demand across the province, the country, and globally. When Premier Ford and I were there, you could see the crates of all their products ready to ship to New Zealand and all through the US and right across Canada, of course. So those are just a couple of the many companies that have drawn on the Ontario Together Fund to produce critical supplies during the COVID-19 pandemic. Their ingenuity and commitment to delivery is what we celebrate as the Ontario spirit. And we want that Ontario spirit to grow and to flourish. So as we talk more about homegrown solutions to the challenges of today, we realize that many of us don't know nearly enough about the products Ontario businesses and workers have been manufacturing right in front of us for years. And that's where our support for the Canadian manufacturers and exporters comes in. Through their research, they discovered that 73% of Ontarians said they already try to purchase Canadian-made products. And since the outbreak of COVID-19, 56% of Ontarians said they would try to purchase domestic goods more often. So, with the support of our government, the CME launched the Ontario Made program. This program helps consumers use their purchasing power to directly support our homegrown manufacturers. At the same time, it helps ensure our province is strong and self-reliant both today and in the future. So the program includes Ontario-made branding that manufacturers can display on their products to appeal to consumers who are looking to buy local, and the supportonteriomade.ca website to connect consumers and supply chain partners with Made in Ontario products through one easy-to-use directory. That's supportonteriomade.ca. In less than 2 months, more than 1,000 manufacturers have registered with the CME to promote more than 3,200 Ontario-made products. So keep an eye out for that Ontario-made logo next time you're at your local grocery or your hardware store. Now, earlier we talked about how everything from masks to hand sanitizers to gowns became commodities seemingly overnight. What oil was to combatants in World War II, masks were to nearly every country in the world as we faced COVID-19. countries started to cut off even their best friends and neighbors in an effort to secure critical supplies. When it came to N95 masks in particular, we knew we needed to act and act fast. So we got together with the federal government and 3M Canada to develop a made in Canada, made in Ontario approach to securing very specific kinds of masks that our frontline health professionals depend on. Both levels of government invested $23 million each to support 3M's capital investment of $70 million. A new facility in Brockville, underway today, will produce the gold standard N95 masks to help meet provincial, national, and private sector demand throughout the pandemic and beyond. And as Premier Ford has said, and I'm sure you've heard him say it, never again will Ontario have to rely on other jurisdictions in time of need. Our partnership with 3M and the feds is providing a made in Ontario solution, further expanding our world-class manufacturing capacity. We know that we must also do more to support homegrown innovation to meet the challenges of today and create the technology unicorns of tomorrow right here in Ontario. Now, we heard this loud and clear through the hundreds of daily stakeholder meetings and our Ontario Jobs and Recovery Committee consultations. In research and development, in R&D, we do really well with the R. But quite frankly, we often struggle with the D portion. So through the works of Jim Balsillie and our team of IP experts, we've crafted an intellectual property action plan. This is a made in Ontario approach for promoting domestic IP generation, protection, and most importantly, commercialization. And this also extends to better leveraging government procurement to ensure we're more strategic in the ways we maximize our buying power and improve the customer service for domestic companies and innovators dealing with the procurement system. It's our goal for Ontario-made innovation to lead to Ontario-made products and Ontario-made jobs. Now, whether it's working with Ontario companies pivoting to meet a new challenge or working with other levels of government to lock down critical supplies, our government is adapting quickly to meet the challenges of the pandemic and new ways of doing business. And we know that even when this pandemic is largely behind us, businesses are going to look very, very different in the future. And if we thought competition was tough globally before, it's going to get even tougher in the years ahead. And we need to get out there globally and not just roll out a welcome mat, but fend off competing jurisdictions for new investments. And that's why we're creating a new investment attraction agency called Invest Ontario. The new agency will be run by people with private sector experience. And these are not just deal makers, but they're deal hunters and they're deal closers. We're going to ensure that they have the tools and the expertise they need to tailor the investment experience to each company looking to invest, whether it's a domestic manufacturer looking to expand or a foreign investor looking to establish a North American foothold. It's going to focus on key sectors like advanced manufacturing, life sciences, and technology. It's never been more critical to position Ontario as a top-tier destination for investment. We need to show businesses at home and across the world that for so many reasons, Ontario is the best place in the world to grow your business. As we look towards the fall and progress further down the road towards economic recovery, it's important to keep an eye on some of the positive signs that are emerging. August saw an increase in employment in Ontario of 141,800, and this after an uncertain spring for workers and businesses alike. It was the third straight month of job gains, bringing the total to 670,000 recovered jobs. But we know there's much more work ahead of us. We must continue to work with our world-class businesses, workers, and innovators to prioritize made in Ontario solutions. These solutions, in partnership to the many efforts our government is making to stabilize and grow our economy today, will shape a sustainable economic climate for our future that will benefit all Ontarians in every region of this province. So I want to say thanks for being here today, for showing your Ontario spirit as we've made this journey together. It's a journey that will not only ensure that Ontario retains its role as the economic engine of Canada, but one where we unleash the full power potential of Ontario onto the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. I appreciate that. That's a very good foundation to really get us going on a conversation that is happening around dinner tables everywhere across this country. I want to sort of just start right at the beginning with the news of today, for example. The government has announced, of course, that there is going to be limited people indoors, limited outdoors. And I know that's not your direct area and your that you're not responsible for that ministry per se. And your government has repeatedly said that they will listen to the best advice of the medical professionals, and that has been quite consistent. But I'm putting this question to you in the context of, as we have seen some semblance of an economic recovery, not in its totality. Businesses aren't whole yet. Minister, you know that, you just cited the numbers. But what I'm thinking now is there is a little bit more anxiety. People are thinking we need to stay back home. We need to restrict our movements. We're not going to go out to the restaurant. We're not going to go to the local business. We're not going to do those things. Talk to us a little bit about how that calculus is for your government when we saw a bit of glimmer of hope, and now we potentially could be going back to, or we could be taking a step back.
Well, I appreciate that, Adrian, but you said it earlier, protecting the health and well-being of Ontarians, that is our government's absolute top priority. So, I mean, to be clear, the latest trends in the numbers, they have raised concerns. Especially as we begin, we're seeing the schools reopening, our post-secondary institutions. I'm here in North Bay. We've got our college and our university who have both reopened as well. And that's why we always listen to the Chief Medical Officer of Health, who gives our guidance to our cabinet. But we took a pause. You heard Minister Elliott announce that just a few days ago. Every region is in stage 3, but there is no stage 4. Where we are is where we are, with some growth out of stage 3. But we have taken a pause for 2 14-day cycles, so basically for a month, where we won't be considering loosening any of our public health measures. In fact, as you are hearing, we're looking at this pause over the next month, and we're continuing to look at our fall preparedness plan, and we'll continue to look at all of the numbers that come in on a daily basis from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, our Health Minister, and our command table.
Minister, the untold billions of dollars that have been required to be spent by all levels of government, your government in particular, federally, municipally, to continue to inject money into the economy, to keep some semblance of normalcy, to keep some things alive and afloat over the course of the last few months. Unprecedented times. Public policy was written very, very quickly. The old playbook, there was none for this. And so all governments had to really scramble to make those accommodations for our new reality. You mentioned, of course, the supply chain. Let's go back to that. Let's go back to March of 2020. News was coming out that at the federal level of government, a lot of our stockpile of PPE in this country had been either expired or given away to other jurisdictions for whatever reasons that those were made. We quickly got online in Ontario, as you've already sort of addressed and talked about how Ontario entrepreneurs and businesses really stepped up and came forward and are ensuring that, to use your government's words, never again. that doesn't happen here again. But with that comes a significant cost, as we don't rely more on our supply chain to be fed globally. Costs here at home are high. Consumers have become very used to cheap goods, let's say. How does our current reality with supply chains here at home in our own backyards, how will these affect costs?
Well, first of all, Adrian, I think it was really important to acknowledge that our manufacturing sector, they truly stepped up. I mean, we thankfully here in Ontario, we have this world-class group of manufacturers, and they responded with, I call it Ontario-made solutions, and they helped us today, and they'll help us tomorrow. You're referring to the dollars that were spent. You know, we saw, you hit the nail on the head. These are unusual times. These are extraordinary times. And right from March, the Premier has said, we will do everything we can. We worked very closely with the federal government to make sure that there were no gaps, but there was also no duplication. So we sat daily, weekly, and monthly, as it's now turned out for 6 months. What do we need? Who's going to do it? How can we handle it? How can it be paid for? But always the underlying thread was that Ontario took care of the supply chain. We did not shut down our manufacturers. And that's why it was so important. For instance, as I spoke about last month, the $23 million that we invested, and the feds also invested in 3M. This is a very, very important part of securing our stockpile of PPE, so that, again, never again will we be caught in any kind of difficulty. That's an important piece of the supply chain. We put our $50 million Ontario Together Fund so that we can help companies make their investments. You know, one of the first calls that I remember making back in March was to Canada Goose. I had just toured their facility pre-COVID and called the president and said, we're going to need gowns. Can you pivot? And immediately, I think they made 600,000 or 700,000 gowns. I could be wrong about that, but they pivoted. Auto companies. We announced, the Premier and I announced an investment in Linamar yesterday or the day before. I can't remember where we were in Guelph. It's $2.5 million. Linamar pivoted. They're one of the large auto parts makers. They pivoted their manufacturing expertise to make components for O2, the name of the company, O2's ventilators. This is powerful resources that we brought to bear in Ontario to make these supplies. So now, as I said in my comments, we now make masks, gowns, hand sanitizer, the wipes that Virox makes, the masks that 3M makes. Everybody's making face shields. We've funded 14 companies and 2 organizations from our Ontario Together Fund. You know, and now we're looking at the Canadian manufacturers and exporters through our investment in their Ontario Made program. People are going to start looking for that Ontario Made logo, the Canadian flag on their products. So we're going to see that these investments are at the root of what we need to be able to go forward, Adrian. So they're investments that are, we started with PPE. I don't mean to talk so long, I apologize, but we started with PPE, and now when the Premier said never again, he wasn't just talking about PPE. We are going to see investments again through our Invest Ontario and others, through life sciences and the pharmaceutical companies. You know, we want to make everything we need in Ontario to make us self-reliant.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Let's expand upon that. I mentioned earlier the extraordinary amount of money that has been put into the economy is going to ultimately, some of those government programs to keep things going, they're slowing down, both at the provincial and the federal level. But we need to remain competitive. We have huge debts and deficits now. Your government came in on an election promise to get the fiscal house in order. I think you probably will be forgiven for this current situation in which we find ourselves in. But that doesn't mean that we can't remain. We can't remain uncompetitive. And long term, that's what it's going to be required, is to look at those debts and deficits. You have a provincial budget that is going to be coming up, and a federal throne speech coming up in a few short weeks and time. Canadians, Ontarians, recognize that their own household debt is increasing, but they're also going to look for competition, competitiveness with the government, with governments across the country. How do you reconcile those two? I mean, we're talking about potential austerity measures. We're talking about potential tax increases. How do you address that, Minister?
Well, I think, first of all, I have to say we have to acknowledge all of the great work that our frontline workers and all of the families, the Premier talks about it every day, 14.5 million families who made a lot of sacrifices along the way. And I know that this has created a lot of hardships for a lot of people, and they have really pulled through and done remarkably well. But I do want to at least acknowledge their challenges that they've had. And I would say to you, Adrian, that I look back to where we were in February, pre-COVID. My end answer will be, we're going to grow our way to success. That's going to be my answer to you. But how we're going to get there? Look where we were in February. We'd been in government about 18 months. We'd seen business community create about over 300,000 new jobs, primarily because of the changes that Premier Ford made. We took about $5 billion of the cost of business away. Through the WSIB, we reduced those payments by 47%. These are real numbers. I sat with the president of one of the large auto companies several months ago before COVID, and he said, you know, Vic, I heard you talk about this $5 billion number and cutting WSIB by 47%. That's $2.2 billion, by the way. He said, I talked to our accounting people about them, and they said, you're absolutely right. Those made a big difference to companies. And he said, those savings that we had, we hired new people with that. So $5 billion worth of savings, WSIB, reducing taxes, the accelerated capital cost allowance that we put in, all these things that we put in created the climate for businesses to want to just jump in. All those fundamentals are still there. In February, we had 250,000 unfilled jobs in Ontario, all because of this business climate. So none of that has changed. All those fundamentals are still in place. So we will unleash Ontario. We will unleash the power that we're seeing. These companies are hiring back. The manufacturing sector, it continues to grow. We saw another 141,000 jobs return in August. The month before, more than 40 or 50,000 of those jobs were manufacturing jobs. So all of those are in place, and that's why we're putting our Invest Ontario, our new agency, in place. And it's all of Ontario. It will have a regional representation on the board. It will be a blue chip board. These are all the pieces, Adrian, that we're putting in place. The Ontario Together Fund, the Invest Ontario, the Ontario Made. They're all pieces to lay the foundation to grow our province and help us with our economic recovery.
And with that, economic recovery, Minister, is going to require an extraordinary amount of investment in new technologies. So can you tell us a little bit about what is the Ontario government doing with respect to the technology sector and ensuring that even the SMEs, the small to medium-sized enterprises, are moving into the new world, so they are able to compete and stay and keep their businesses open?
I have to tell you, when I first took over in this ministry, I was really quite surprised. Ontario is the #2 IT cluster in all of North America, just after behind Silicon Valley. We have 314,000 tech workers in Ontario, 23,000 ICT firms. We've got a tremendous advantage. And a couple of the pieces, again, goes back to those fundamentals, the pieces that we put in place. Look at where we are in terms of future technology. We have connected and autonomous vehicles is a really good example. GM, with their hundreds of employees they put in Markham. Ford, hundreds of employees in Ottawa. BlackBerry QNX with hundreds of employees in Ottawa. Uber, I was at the opening months ago of their connected and autonomous vehicle facility on Bloor, just almost next door to your building, as a matter of fact. These are companies that are setting up and investing here in Ontario for lots of reasons. We have a wide open immigration system. We are encouraging immigration. When I've traveled around the world to visit tech companies and try to lure them into Ontario, they all talk about two things: our immigration policies and our training, our university education system, and the training that we offer. We have 49,000 STEM graduates every single year. And we're open for business, open for jobs, open for immigration. And I think that's really, really important. And since then, as I mentioned, we launched our IP, our intellectual property action plan. And that's really going to drive our long-term economic competitiveness. As I say, we've always been very good at the research, but on the development side, we need work, and that's why we've sort of sectored that off, and we're going at it full bore. So, we have all the fundamentals in place, and now we're ready to unleash our tech companies as well.
So that kind of ties into what I want to step into next a little bit, Minister. And just for all of those that have joined us here for this talk, please don't forget to send your questions to the moderator. They are coming to me live on my phone as I speak with Minister Fedeli. So please keep them coming. Minister, it ties into a bit about what sort of the next step with respect to the commercial properties, the commercial rents. We know we've heard about the challenges with respect to personal and private properties. Now let's talk more broadly about the commercial rents. So one step is keeping the doors open. The next is, or if some need rent relief on their commercial properties. Talk to us a little bit about what the government has done and what businesses can look forward to in the future.
Well, I think everybody's aware that we're working with the federal government on this particular program. We put $296 million into a more than $1 billion Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program. And since then, we've extended that commercial relief for businesses through August and September. We intend to introduce legislation that'll extend the evictions moratorium retroactively from September 1st to the end of September. And we've seen 50,000 commercial tenants across the province had an application filed by their landlord. And together, these tenants employ about 550,000 people. So, the program still needs work, and it still needs a constant communication. And right now, discussions are ongoing with the feds about the future of the program and what we can do to reverse some of the negative impacts. So it's been always a work in progress, as everything. As I said earlier, none of this came with a manual, and we always met with the feds. Never any politics have been involved, and I'm really certain that everybody has seen that. So it's always, what do you got? What do you need? Who can do it? Who can deliver it best? Can you deliver this program best? Well, maybe the province is better geared. Maybe the feds are better geared. So it's been a real collaborative effort, I must say.
So we're getting some questions, Minister, with respect to obviously our biggest trading partner, our closest ally, even though sometimes that was questionable at times during the pandemic with the United States. Border remains closed, but still porous, to be sure. But the trading is obviously, it's been restricted, though still trucks are still going across the borders. We're still sharing goods, but it is getting to be, there's still a lot of pressure on our manufacturing sector, and that is causing challenges as well. So for starters, how does the Ontario government react to the tariff being lifted? It was arbitrarily lifted the other day. I mean, it was a positive thing, but do you have any reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that it was a good day. Certainly seeing that the tariff being lifted was a positive move. But, I think Bob Lighthizer, who does the U.S. negotiations primarily, he's always wanted a managed trade agreement, and they didn't get that. They got a free trade agreement. So, this talk about quotas and whatnot, that is all a U.S. Talking points. Nobody in Canada ever agreed to a quota. Nobody wants a quota. Nobody's in favor of quotas. We have a free trade agreement. So whether it was softwood lumber or in the last while or aluminum right now, we expect and have seen the feds defend the free trade agreement, and we stand shoulder to shoulder with our federal partners, with our provincial and territorial partners against any kind of protectionism from the U.S. And I can talk more about that if you.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, I'm happy to have you expand upon it, because no doubt with the regular contact that you and the department have with businesses, again, small, medium, large, our goods going down to the United States, for example, or even anywhere else around the world, as we, the world is available to all of us because of the internet, supply chains, all of these things. I mean, it's not just our own backyard we have to supply to, but the restrictions with the United States has been certainly challenging, and you're likely hearing from these businesses on a regular basis. So what is it that they're saying? Is there stuff that are there new policies that need to be negotiated? How do we make this easier? Cutting the red tape. Your government has taken a significant initiative to do those things. I believe, I realize that this is kind of an all-encompassing question, but I think it really, what I'm trying to get to is really speak to the heart of what is holding us back from unleashing, as you use your words, unleashing Ontario.
Well, let me kind of give you a picture of the three faces of trade. We've got our international trade, and certainly with the travel restrictions, our ministry, we generally have about 80 or 90 trade shows that businesses, that we take businesses on, not me, but various agencies that go. Though that travel has been curtailed, and so we have really switched over to a virtual trade show. So while we can't be there, we're dealing on a regular basis, Adrian. We start early in the morning in Asia with our calls to partners, and there we have offices, of course, in China, in Japan, and in South Korea. We have, as we move west, we have offices in India. We still communicate with our groups, so we're still doing trade virtually, but we've set up a series of virtual trade shows. They're working well, and we participate in virtual trade shows like Farnborough Air Show, the big international air show. It was done virtually this year, as well as many others. I want to talk about that is still very, very well underway, and we're hearing lots of good successes from companies. We've had some recent new companies open here in Ontario from overseas who just know that Canada is this sea of tranquility in an otherwise topsy-turvy world. So that I wanted to handle that. Then I wanted to talk about interprovincial trade, and then we'll get to the U.S. Just very briefly, Premier Ford has stated we are open for business, and we are free traders, and that means we're really going to be leading the way. It shouldn't be easier for a company in Ontario to ship a product to Texas than it is to BC or Alberta or Quebec. It just shouldn't be that way. But we do have a lot of restrictions, so we are working with other provinces. We're really at the center of this in trying to boost and hope that we're the ones who achieve the success of breaking through the international or the interprovincial trade barriers. It just makes no sense. You need a different tire pressure in a vehicle almost in every province. You need a different first aid kit in a truck. This one has so many bandages, that one has so much gauze. It's just ridiculous. We've got to do that. Now, so we're working on our interprovincial trade, and that leaves the US trade. It's about our messaging. Of course, it's pre-election right now, and they're very much in a big Buy America program, but we have a free trade agreement. So Premier Ford has been leading missions. I've been on the one into Texas and into Washington just before COVID struck. In fact, all the governors were coming to Toronto in April, but that had to be curtailed, to talk about these one-off sub-national agreements where we can meet with X state and talk about an open relationship where Buy America doesn't count for Ontario. We'll open Ontario stores and you're opening your state stores, and our companies can work together. 300,000 men and women wake up in Ohio every single morning to make products to ship to Canada. 9 million Americans wake up every morning to make products to ship to Canada. They need to understand that we have this tight relationship, and that putting a tariff on one product really puts a spanner into the whole gear works. And so that communication is working behind the scenes, but we need to make it more public. Short questions.
No, it's fair because it's important and it's contextual in the broader sense of, we are looking at continuing to open and how that is going to affect all sectors, because we know that the premiers across Canada are meeting with the federal government over the course of the next couple of days and talking about things like this, and interprovincial trade has been a significant part of certainly what the Western premiers have been talking about, and certainly what Premier Ford has come to realize since he's become premier is sometimes a head scratcher in terms of why we're so inconsistent. But I want to move on in the bit of time that we have left. A number of terrific questions are coming in from those who have graciously joined us today. So one of the questions has been, and I'm just going to put my own preamble on it. We've seen some, not a lot, but some certainly looking at their new reality. They don't necessarily have to go back into an office. The kids are not in school. They've moved on, but they're still working. They're leaving the big cities. They're leaving the urban communities and looking outside of the 416 to establish themselves. So places like where you are in North Bay, for example, you're seeing, and not necessarily North Bay, but smaller communities which are growing. They're seeing an influx of residents moving there. Are you seeing then an opportunity with business growth in some of these smaller communities in Ontario that otherwise pre-COVID weren't seeing a population growth?
Well, that's a really insightful question. I'm gonna give a shout out to North Bay because you mentioned, but it's very applicable to what you're saying. Just this week, Monday or Tuesday this week, North Bay, my hometown, and the riding I represent of Nipissing, was named the #1 in the site selection guide for a lot of the reasons you just spoke about. But last week they were listed. North Bay was in the top 5 real estate relocation places in Ontario, the top 5. So you wonder why. And it really is. We've got everything in the smaller communities that the larger centers have, but it's a completely different way of life. And a lot of people, as you mentioned, are doing just what you said. But we are still bringing in huge immigration every year, and they will always center on the large cities. So, it's not as if you're going to see any kind of a major change in the large centers. They're going to grow. Premier wants to see our population hit 18 million, and we certainly are well on the way to reaching that. But to your point, that is exactly why we have things like the Eastern Ontario Development Fund to help these companies grow in Eastern Ontario. We have the Southwestern Development Fund to help them grow in that area. North of the French River, we have the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund, and that helps companies with some funds to help them get settled in places that may be more expensive or may cost more money over the course of the year. But we really are seeing that. And it was interesting, Adrian, in that real estate article that declared North Bay in the top 5, the #1 real estate question wasn't how many bedrooms or how many bathrooms or what's the view. It is, what's the broadband capacity? The grandparents who move want to know that their grandkids are going to visit them, and they won't if they can't go online. That's why we've seen more than 300 million invested in Ontario in broadband last year. There's a $150 million program. It just closed a week or so ago for municipalities in Northern and rural Ontario. We are making broadband a very big deal. We really need the federal partners on this one. We haven't got a commitment from them yet to match our money and to make that 150 million grow to 500 million with the local partners. So this is really driving some of the change. It was a big part of our discussion with Quebec at our summit last week, was broadband.
So you've answered one of the questions that actually came in. So we can go on from that. That certainly the expansion of broadband is such a significant part of doing all these things. But I think tied to that, Mr. Minister, is you're being asked if you can then comment on what the Ontario government is doing to help SMEs invest in digitizing their business to keep them competitive.
Yeah, look, I've talked about some of the things from our job and recovery committee, the Ontario Together portal, the Ontario Together Fund, the Ontario Made program, the Invest Ontario, our IP launch. For small business specifically, we've got Digital Main Street. It's a little more than $57 million, 50 million from the feds, 7.7, I think, million from the province of Ontario. And this is to help 23,000 small businesses go digital so that they can build an online presence. They can receive $2,500 each business to help their business grow. We bring in some of the students to help them as well. But there's a fund specifically, and they just have to Google Digital Main Street and see what this program is all about. It's being launched right now as we speak in many cities across Ontario. And it's a real big plus and money in the pocket of small businesses. We've got other programs like Tackling the Barriers. It's another website. They can go on there and we were able to make changes for their individual business. It's red tape reduction so that their delivery vehicles can bring things off hours where they weren't allowed to before, where some of the liquor guidelines can change, where they can deliver, where they can have the takeout from a restaurant can also include liquor. Those all things came through our Tackling the Barriers website. So we encourage the small businesses to go on ontario.ca and look at all the many programs. There's a PPE directory that they can be on if they're making and or selling personal protective equipment. There's the workplace supply guidelines that if they need to know what their business needs to do to be ready to open or to be COVID safe. All of these things are on the website. We've got a great small business programs, including the fact that we just reduced their permanently their small business tax rate last year.
One of the things that your colleague at the cabinet table, Minister Montney McNaughton, has been talking about is really propping up and really showcasing the skilled trades that we have in this province and the ability for us to really help fill gaps in the job market with the extraordinary amount of talent that's out there. And so this next question is in relation to that. In terms of attracting investment, how strong is Ontario's human capital supply, especially outside of the urban centers and in the skilled trades?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I know that you mentioned Minister McNaughton, that he recently called on the federal government to double our current annual allocation of the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program up to 13,300 over the next 2 years. So we're absolutely committed to continuing to develop and attract skilled workers, especially from overseas. We're going to need these bodies to help our businesses grow. So you have a firm commitment, a solid commitment from us, including the fact, as I think I mentioned earlier, that we're educating 49,000 STEM graduates every single year. So we know that training and immigration are both going to be huge, huge pieces of putting our economy on a track to recovery. Again, I go back to February. We had 250,000 unfilled jobs in Ontario. In our little region here in northeastern Ontario, 7,700 unfilled jobs before COVID struck.
Just a couple of minutes left, Mr. Minister. Most recently, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce came out with a report talking about how women have been so disproportionately affected by COVID-19. They've called it the She Session. And even recently, just a few days ago, we at the Canadian Club hosted a panel talking about She Session and She Recovery. Many women are entrepreneurs in this province, in this country. How is your government specifically looking at assistance in that regard, particularly looking at the disproportionate amount of, and how much women are relied upon to continue doing the household, continue to work, continue to do all of the things that we did outside of a crisis, but in addition to now with all these other jobs and responsibilities that we all have, but disproportionately affecting women? Are there specific programs? Are there things that the provincial government is doing to address that?
So I've certainly Minister Jill Dunlop addressed this in the legislature just the day before yesterday and spoke very eloquently about it. And we're working with the federal government as well on any specific programs. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying to find out where all the, we want to fill all the gaps and make sure we have no duplication. So we continue to work with the feds on all of the programs. Now that we've got a better understanding, we've seen a huge proportion, just in the month of August, by the way, a large proportion of the people who came back to work, the 141,000, were women. A far larger percentage were women. So we're starting to see that recovery taking place, but it's certainly on the radar as it's a very strong issue, and we'll continue, Adrian, to look at all the programs to make sure that we are making sure that the foundation is laid for a recovery that is fair and equitable to every single person in Ontario.
Mr. Minister, I want to thank you so much for your time. We could have probably spent another hour, so we're going to have to invite you back as we continue down this significant journey to recover through our economy. So thank you to you for your candor and laying a lot of this out. You know, helping peel back a bit of the curtain behind what's going on between the decisions is, I think, very valuable and very, very important. So we appreciate that. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adrian.
And thank you very much, Adrian, for your expert moderation of, I'm sure, the hundreds of questions you received. Minister, thank you for your perspective on the challenges that we face as a province, and also the many, many, many opportunities that the residents of Ontario can look forward to in the weeks, years, and decades to come. A couple of other thank yous. Our sponsors, as I mentioned off the top, Bruce Power and PwC, also our technology partners, Van Valkenburg Communications and livemeeting.ca, for making it possible for us to come together virtually. And mostly to you. This is a big year for the Canadian Club of Toronto as we try different things and work in a model that will be largely virtual. So we really appreciate you finding time to join us for our event today. Two events to highlight coming up later in the month. First, on September the 24th, we are hosting a discussion on the future of long-term care in Ontario. That is a pretty hot and relevant topic. And second, on September the 30th, we are partnering with the Institute for Sustainable Finance for an expert panel on Canada's climate smart economy. So much going on, so much to look forward to. Thank you all for joining us today. Please stay healthy and safe.